LinkedIn makes some user content inaccessible within China. The professional social network says the new policy aims to respect local legal requirements. China's young people are taking up a new attitude toward life, the do-nothing approach. It was born out of a desire not to be slaves to their paychecks, but Chinese authorities are trying to nip it in the bud. A former Huawei director is on trial in Poland. He and a Polish cybersecurity expert allegedly spied for Beijing. This trial could be a significant hit for the Chinese telecom gear company Huawei in the European market. Hungary is protesting plans to open a Chinese university campus in the country. To make its stance clear, Budapest is renaming streets near the university, giving them titles like Free Hong Kong Road, Uyghur Martyrs Road, or after Tibetan leader the Dalai Lama. And 15 wild elephants in China have trekked more than 300 miles, and they're not stopping yet. But just where are they going? Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. LinkedIn is apparently blocking access to some content for users in China. It's in order to, as they call, respect legal requirements. This, according to screenshots LinkedIn users posted on Twitter. American writer and political commentator Ben Weingarten posted an official message LinkedIn sent to him. It says, your profile and activity, such as items you share with your network, are not visible to those accessing LinkedIn from within China at this time. He posted the screenshot on June 3rd with a comment that says, unbelievable, yet totally believable, on the eve of the Tian'anmen Square massacre, a sign of the world's continued kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party. 32 years ago, on June 4th, Chinese soldiers opened fire on unarmed students and citizens in Beijing's Tian'anmen Square and nearby areas. It's estimated that thousands of people died. This after students protested for months against CCP officials' corruption and demanded democracy. Taiwan-based writer and consultant J. Michael Cole also noticed similar LinkedIn restrictions. In an official notice sent to him, the company says, we will work with you to minimize the impact if you update the publication section of your profile, adding, but the decision whether to update your profile is yours. A comment on Twitter mocks LinkedIn's notice, saying this is a false choice and a forced choice. The comment says the Chinese Communist Party excels at presenting people with false choices. The notice also says LinkedIn offers a localized version in China. But another Twitter user believes using the term localized is pathetic, saying LinkedIn's creative use of localized version is another way of saying censorship. The comment says, please don't abuse this word. You're just afraid of the Chinese government. NTD cannot yet independently verify what prohibited content refers to. Cole gives a list of items that the Chinese regime may consider to be sensitive, including Taiwan, Hong Kong, Xinjiang, the South China Sea, among others. The social network platform started operating in China since 2014. It decided to stick to the CCP censorship laws to get access, and now has over 50 million users across China. Earlier this year, LinkedIn announced it is pausing new member signups in China in order to respect local laws. A museum in Hong Kong dedicated to commemorating the victims of China's 1989 Tian'anmen Square crackdown on pro-democracy protesters is closing for now. The museum says it's under investigation over its operating license. Here's more on Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's June 4th museum closed its doors on Wednesday. The space is dedicated to commemorating the victims of China's 1989 crackdown in Tian'anmen Square. The museum that once displayed artifacts donated by family members of deceased students, archive photos, and video footage from Tian'anmen Square is now behind closed doors. The museum said officials had entered its premises on Tuesday, claiming it had not obtained a public entertainment venue license and was potentially in breach of regulations. It was opened a decade ago by activists from the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements of China. The museum said it would seek legal advice and made the decision to temporarily close. The same group that organizes the city's annual Tian'anmen Vigil. Alliance member Mak Hoi-Wah said the decision to shut was devastating.
The past 32 years, the existence of the Hong Kong Alliance, we did nothing illegal to harm the country or Hong Kong. And we have been getting legal approval for our possessions as well as assembly, candlelight vigil on the June 4th. every year in the past until last year.
In a statement, the museum said, facing the current difficult political situation, the alliance deeply believes that Hong Kongers will not forget June 4th. The inspection raises concerns over freedom of speech in Hong Kong, which traditionally holds the largest June 4th vigil in the world to commemorate the crackdown on pro-democracy protesters. Mainland China bans commemorations and heavily censors the topic, and now there are fears that vigils will not be allowed anymore in Hong Kong. Police have banned the vigil 2 years in a row, citing coronavirus restrictions. But museum organizers hope people won't forget this moment in history.
Hong Kong and Macau used to be the last places in communist China where people can openly commemorate the Tian'anmen Square massacre. But this year marks the second year since Beijing banned such commemorations there.
People in Hong Kong and Macau used to be able to openly commemorate the Tian'anmen Square massacre on June 4th, but not anymore. Just like Hong Kong, former Portuguese colony Macau is supposedly part of Beijing's one country, two systems framework. The system supposedly allows for freedoms of speech and assembly in the two cities, even though they are part of communist China. But Macau's ban on public Tian'anmen commemorations this year is reaching a new level. Macau police are claiming it's a matter concerning national security. A local organization has been commemorating the massacre annually for 3 decades. They've used posters that say, "Hold slaughterers accountable," "End political persecution," and "End one-party rule." But Macau police rejected the organization's application for the event again this year for the second year in a row. Macau police said Beijing has clearly defined the 1989 event as a counter-revolutionary rebellion. They added that the Macau demonstrators' posters are false propaganda, and they are challenging Beijing's authority. The police also claimed that the commemorations violated Macau's criminal code. The Director General of the organizing committee told Voice of America the rejection is a political crackdown. Hong Kong-based media professional Mak Yin-ting also told Voice of America no matter how Beijing tries to crack down, people will always remember the Tian'anmen massacre. She said Beijing silences those who stand up, pretends that it never happened, and hopes we will forget after a decade or two. But that's absolutely impossible, Max stated.
A new trend is gaining traction among young people in China to do nothing in life and sustain one's existence at a minimal level. But the Chinese regime was quick to denounce it. What's behind this phenomenon?
Among China's young people in their 20s and 30s, a saying is quickly gaining popularity and trending on social media. That is lie-flatism. Some Chinese netizens also call it the do-nothing approach or the lie-down movement. The term originated from a post on a popular Chinese online forum, and the forum has since removed the post. The term means lowering one's temptations to a minimum, not working, not buying real estate, not going shopping, not getting married, and not having kids, only sustaining one's existence at a minimal level. It reflects a lifestyle and an attitude to life. People following the idea say they don't want to be slaves of money. A Chinese netizen agrees, saying, no matter how hard you work, you cannot get rich. You are merely a tool that other people use and discard when it's worn out. Think it over. Indeed, we don't need to be so tired. Another says, the greatest devaluation in our society is not the devaluation of currency, but the devaluation of your efforts. This is the most desperate. A comment pinpoints the root cause of the movement, saying to lie flat reflects a person's extreme disappointment in the future and extreme despair in a lack of social justice. He then adds, the gap between the rich and the poor is getting wider and wider. There are 600 million Chinese with a monthly income of under $150, so they have to control their temptations and lie flat. A Chinese official said at a forum earlier this year that China's income gap is still large. Around 720 million Chinese earn less than $300 a month. A 2019 report from the Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences reveals the heavy burden on families that want to raise a child. The report says families in some areas in Shanghai with annual incomes under $8,000 spend over 70% of their earnings on the child, usually until the child turns 15. As the do-nothing approach gains popularity, the Chinese communist regime started to take notice. A Chinese media mildly warned that if this lie-flatism becomes popular among young people, it will turn into a force of resistance and challenge the existing social structure. Beijing began to adopt a harder stance as the trend grew in popularity. A CCP mouthpiece warned, saying it's obvious those followers of live flatism will do much harm to our economic and social development. We should be aware. Another CCP mouthpiece criticized the trend as shameful, saying it lacks a sense of justice. Soon after, other Chinese state-owned media started to say, you can accept your fate, but cannot lie flat. U.S.-based news commentator Shi Shan tries to explain what Beijing means by it.
You may accept your fate as it is, but if you want to lie flat and not work, it's absolutely not permitted.
Shi says the choice to lie flat and stay away from pressure is very personal. It's nothing political. But if the communist regime starts to criticize it and even suppress the trend, they make it very, very political.
Beijing is reportedly pressuring China's largest audio streaming platform to drop its plans to list in the United States and go for Hong Kong instead. NTD's Patrick Hayden tells us more.
The Chinese regime wants the country's largest online audio platform, Ximalaya, to drop its plans to list on the US stock market. Sources say Ximalaya filed an IPO in the US in April and was expecting to raise about $500 million. But Beijing wants the company to list on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange instead. That's likely so it can keep a tighter ideological grip on the private media company. Concerns are also that US regulators will have more access to the company's audit documents if listed in the US. Chinese regulators, including the Cyberspace Administration of China, are pushing for the Hong Kong listing. Ximalaya did not respond to NTD for comment. The audio platform has more than 250 million active users each month. It's backed by tech majors Tencent, Xiaomi, Baidu and Sony Music. Sources say the company is still in talks with the Chinese regulator and will make a decision in the next 2 weeks. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
News app Newsbreak is popular among many Americans, but its roots may actually be in China. Recently, people are starting to question if this self-proclaimed local news platform is really immune from Beijing's influence. Here are the details.
Popular news app Newsbreak may have close ties with Communist China. This, according to a report by U.S.-based digital news magazine The Wire China. Concerns are rising that the Chinese regime may have influenced the app. Newsbreak was launched 6 years ago. It now says it has 45 million monthly active users. It's in third place on the Apple Store's News Apps downloads chart and in first place on the Google Play Store. Particle Media owns Newsbreak. California-based businessman Jeff Zhang co-founded the company in 2015. Zhang is originally from China and is a former Yahoo executive. He also founded a top Chinese news app in 2013 in Beijing, and Newsbreak is regarded as its English-language version and part of its international expansion strategy.
I think the concern with the news aggregator app is that a company like that could come under pressure to, manipulate the environment and the information in a way that might be very subtle and in a way that might actually be hard for users or even analysts to detect. And you don't know what you don't know.
In 2014, Zhang sold nearly half of the Chinese app's shares to Phoenix New Media. It's a subsidiary of Phoenix Media Investment based in Hong Kong, and the Chinese regime partially owns the company. The news app soon became part of Beijing's propaganda machine, helping the regime with its political agenda and information control. Newsbreak now claims it no longer has ties to Phoenix Media or the Chinese news app, but it admits that at least from 2015 to 2019, its early supporters were companies partly owned by the Chinese communist regime. Sinologist Martin Halle at Charles University in Prague tells The Wire China that given Newsbreak's close ties to Beijing, it is not immune to pressure from Chinese authorities. Another concern is the potential privacy risk, because Newsbreak's data requests are expansive. Data scientist Daniel Cho at Georgetown University tells The Wire China, essentially, this is a tracking app. Its privacy policy even allows cross-border data transfer. So far, there is no hard evidence that Newsbreak is actively involved in Beijing's influence operations. But observers believe that the risks are there and that Beijing can switch on the capability at any time.
This kind of laying of a foundation of access to the information dissemination infrastructure of other countries, then something happens. It's COVID, it's the Xinjiang crisis. Suddenly the CCP feels that it needs to defend itself, and it will activate those channels.
On Monday, Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping re-emphasized his regime's international propaganda push. It includes guiding international public opinion and winning a battle of narratives against the U.S. and its allies.
A former Huawei director is on trial in Poland on spying charges. He and a Polish cybersecurity expert allegedly spied for the Chinese regime under the cover of business. NTD's Patrick Hayden, our reporter in Europe, has more.
Two men accused of spying for China went on trial Tuesday in Poland. A Chinese former sales director of Huawei and a Polish cybersecurity expert faced the charges. The men, Weijing Wang and Piotr Debilo, are both pleading not guilty. Because of the classified nature of the case, the trial will be held in secret. Both men were arrested at the beginning of 2019. Former President Trump's administration lobbied European allies to boycott Huawei's next-generation mobile phone networking gear on security grounds. Huawei's fortunes in Europe have tumbled because of the US campaign. Polish paper Gazeta Wyborcza reported that Wang's indictment alleges he was a spy from 2011 to 2019. And during that time, he sought contracts for Huawei to gain insight and influence over government data systems in Poland. If convicted, they face a minimum of 3 years in prison. The trial is expected to take months. Huawei declined to comment because the case is ongoing. Patrick Hayden, NTD News, London.
Poland's trial for the former Huawei director could steer to a significant hit for Huawei in the European market. It may lead to Huawei losing the entire Central Eastern European or CEE market. Poland leads as the most powerful economy in the CEE. Its GDP towers over the other more than a dozen countries in the region. As a leader, Poland's hardline stance on Huawei could create a domino effect in other parts of the CEE. The U.S. has recognized this as well. In 2019, the Trump administration signed an agreement to cooperate with Poland on 5G. It was to exclude Chinese telecom companies such as Huawei from involving in it. Then U.S. Vice President Mike Pence said that the move will set a vital example for the rest of Europe. The mayor of Hungary's capital, Budapest, says he will rename streets in his city near a planned campus of a Chinese university. He says the project would put Hungary's anti-communist values in question and would commemorate human rights abuses by Beijing. One street will be named after the Dalai Lama, the exiled spiritual leader of Tibet. Another will be called Uyghur Martyrs Road, after the ethnic group that the U.S. and other nations say has been a victim of Beijing's genocide. And a third will be called Free Hong Kong Road. Beijing reacted to the name change by saying Hungary's behavior is contemptible. The Chinese regime continues to assert territorial claims in the South China Sea. On Monday, the Malaysian Air Force reported 16 Chinese military jets flying in Malaysia's airspace. The aircrafts came as close as 70 miles from Malaysia's north coast. The Chinese military jets were flying near the same height that commercial jets fly at. Malaysia labeled the incident a serious threat to national sovereignty and flight safety. The Malaysian foreign minister has summoned the Chinese ambassador to explain this activity, but Beijing denies any wrongdoing. It says that the planes were conducting training exercises in Chinese territory. Beijing self-proclaims almost all of the South China Sea, but an international tribunal has deemed the claims unlawful. Beijing's claims also overlap with Malaysian territory. The South China Sea is strategically important. The region is one of the world's busiest sea lanes and holds many natural resources. This doesn't seem to be the first time that China has intruded into Malaysian waters. Malaysia says that Chinese Navy and Coast Guard ships went into its waters 89 times between 2016 and 2019. Argentina was once the world's 5th largest beef exporter. Now, the country's government is restricting beef shipments abroad to contain runaway inflation. They blame it on high demand from their biggest customer, China.
In Argentina, grilling beef on the barbecue is a human right. But now red meat eaters have to reduce their intake and change their diet.
We have barbecue once in a while, but now we are combining it with other cuts to replace the traditional barbecue. Point of the shoulder, rump tail, pork butt.
This is because of an over 60% surge in beef prices last year. According to a report by Argentina's meat industry chamber, the country's per capita beef consumption plunged to a 100-year low in April.
Many people bought cuts that are more expensive. Now I'm seeing that they're asking me if we have another option, something a little more accessible, because the majority of people buy for the family. So they are trying to buy cuts that look good, but are at a more accessible price from what they were having before.
Many factors are driving up prices: rising feeding costs, a shortage of slaughterhouse workers, and high demand from China. Since 2018, China has been ramping up meat imports to offset declines in its hog herd due to African swine fever. Beijing recently suspended some beef imports from its number 3 supplier, Australia. It was due to diplomatic tensions. On May 17th, Argentina halted shipments of beef for 30 days as annual inflation approaches 50%. But farmers protested the ban immediately with a halt on local livestock trading. They claim most of the exports are older cows that Argentines don't consume domestically.
The measure, analyzed coldly, is that if there is more meat, the price will drop because the supply is increasing. It is not the meat that we consume. It shouldn't be.
Argentina's ban is expected to shake up global meat markets and cause buyers in China to turn to Brazil and the U.S. U.S. beef exports to China hit a monthly record in March. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the U.S. sold over 16,000 tons of beef to China.
A herd of 15 elephants in China have embarked on a long journey, trekking at least 300 miles. But where to? Wildlife authorities say they don't know why the animals left their nature reserve to begin with. NTD's Christina Kim has more for us.
The herd of wild animals left a nature reserve near the city of Pu'er last year. They've since walked at least 300 miles north, approaching a major city called Kunming on Wednesday. The group started out with 16 elephants, but 2 reportedly returned home, and 1 baby was born during the walk, bringing the total number of elephants back up to 15. Drone images show 6 female and 3 male adults, with 3 juveniles and 3 calves. It's not clear why these gentle giants embarked on the long journey, but it may be a lack of food. Chinese state-run media Xinhua reports a decline of edible plants in forest habitats. Another theory is that an inexperienced leader has led the whole group astray. Authorities have tried to redirect the elephants using roadblocks and food to entice the animals, but it wasn't successful. Asian elephant expert Chen Mingyong tells Xinhua this is the longest distance migration of wild elephants recorded in China. But the elephants' journey hasn't been a walk in the park for everyone. They've reportedly caused $1.1 million in damage to farmland. A large task force, cars, and drones are tracking the elephants' movements, and residents are urged to not try to come into contact with the animals. Christina Kim, NTD News.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, China in Focus is partnering with the Epoch Times newspaper on their new subscription-based streaming platform, Epoch TV. That's where you can watch our exclusive special reports, like this one, every Friday night. In them, we'll explore questions like how China lures in foreign companies to steal their technology, how the Chinese regime is actively collecting health data on people around the world, how the ancient Chinese philosophy of good governance differs from the current-day communist regime, and much more. Be sure to check out these investigative episodes by clicking on the link in the description down below. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you really want to understand what's happening with China. You can still watch our Monday to Thursday episodes for free on YouTube, NTD Cable TV, the NTD website, and the Epoch TV website. In our next special report, we explore how compatible traditional Chinese culture is with Western civilization and question just what's to blame for the clash between China and the free world, Confucius or Karl Marx. Some frame the West conflict with China as a clash of opposite societies. But what defines the society they're talking about? Is it China's 5,000 years of culture, deeply influenced by Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism? Or is it the communist ideology that's occupied China for the last 100 years? In our next special report, we explore how compatible traditional Chinese culture is with Western civilization and question just what's to blame for the clash between China and the free world, Confucius or Karl Marx. Be sure to tune in on Epoch TV at 9 p.m. June 4th. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.